Welcome back, everyone. Now we are going to talk about the shadow pandemic.
And that is on domestic violence.
For victims of domestic violence.
On domestic violence.
Domestic violence cases worldwide.
Domestic violence.
The shadow pandemic.
As you will have understood, we are going to discuss the subject of domestic violence, which has been on the rise since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The questions we will try to answer is what is the current situation here in Ireland, but also what measures are put in place by the Irish government to support associations and provide adequate assistance to victims. But first, are the Irish people really aware of the problem of domestic violence? That's what our reporter Emre Tolga tried to find out.
Hello Andrea, hello everyone. Today I'm in the streets of Dublin, where domestic violence cases rose by the third since the beginning of the pandemic. That's why I'm here to ask Dubliners if they heard about the situation and especially the sharp increase since the beginning of the lockdown.
Yes, I've actually been hearing about the increase in domestic violence, but mostly actually throughout social media. But in my opinion, I think that the government should act more upon it, since if it's being covered more upon social media, not on the government and the actual reports, in my opinion, I think they should act more upon it in many other ways and not something that you should see on social media such as Instagram, where nothing can actually be done to help prevent at least.
I think it's very, very sad in this day and age that people are trapped in that sort of an environment, and unfortunately there is nothing that anybody can do to help them. I know there's women's aid and things out there, but they can't reach everybody, and I think the government should do more to help people that are in that position.
The main thing is that people don't get punished enough for it, I guess, because if they did, then they would know that there's a punishment for it, so they wouldn't keep on doing it. So I believe that the Irish government should at least show that they're punishing people or take like other measures or stricter measures for that, so that it can stop.
Yeah, I've heard about it on the news, heard about it on social media. I have, yeah.
Yes, I have. It's something you hear about a lot at the news as well, and I'm also part of the charity, so I donate a good bit, and they'd send me letters kind of identifying, obviously using different names, but we get a story about, you know, Jenny who's being domestic violence in her house, whether that's physical or mental. So I'd stay informed about that and try and support where I can.
As you can see, people are aware of the increase of domestic violence since the beginning of the pandemic, and some people are looking at the Irish government to supply better assistance to the people who are suffering from this.
Now let's see with an explanatory video how bad is the situation to the country.
In March 2020, the first lockdown is announced by the Irish government. Nearly 5 million Irish citizens had to stay home. This lockdown perturbed their way of lives, not without any consequences. Since the pandemic began, violence has moved indoors. Victims are trapped at home. The COVID-19 led to a sharp increase in domestic violence cases against women and children. Why the pandemic provoked that increase? First, social isolation. People are working from home and everything is closed outside. Victims cannot escape the marital domestic. Also, financial and psychological problems can encourage violence. Finally, an increase of consumption of alcohol and substances. It has been recognized as one of the strongest predictors of physical violence. Since pubs are closed, abuser drinkers are home and can inflict to their partner the violent effect of alcohol. The figures shows it clearly. Garda received 43,000 reports of domestic violence and related crimes. It represents an increase of 16% in the same period in 2019. In Ireland, 38 domestic violence services are located in cities, including 19 in Dublin. They provide outreach support, counseling, court accompaniment, child support and refugees. The lack of refugee spaces for victims are impacting the situation today. According to a Safe Island report, 151 requests for refugees could not be met during the first lockdown due to a lack of space. This Friday will be the Go Purple Day. Municipal buildings will light up purple across the country. If you want to support the cause, you are encouraged to wear purple. If you are affected by domestic violence, the Women's Health Helpline is 1800 3041 900. Men's aid can be reached at 01 554 3811.
It is now time to hear from a Governor Deglan O'Brien in charge of community safety policy for the Department of Justice.
Good afternoon.
Firstly, could you please tell us that domestic violence since the beginning of the pandemic?
There's a number of things. Our police force on Garda Síochána mounted an operation to make sure that victims know that police services are still there. It's Operation Fuishif, which means Operation Relief. And that included proactively calling back domestic violence, for example, who had reported over the past 2 years, to let them know still there to protect them, and to let the perpetrator know, which is just as important, that's still actively available. We also put together an action plan led by our department, which included an awareness campaign in the media, again to let victims know and be confident that protection is still available. And we work very much with non-governmental organisations in this area, and we put additional funding of close to €400,000 in place to support their work during the period of severe COVID-related restrictions.
Okay, second question, Sir. Hayley Mulligan, working for National Women's Council in Ireland, expressed his desire to see the appearance of a single government department on domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. Has the government looked into this?
Yes, there is a commitment in the current programme for government, which was agreed in the formation of a new government last year. The commitment is to conduct an audit of what the programme for government describes as the way in which responsibility for domestic violence, domestic abuse and sexual crime services is segmented across government departments. So that audit was commissioned earlier this year by our department, the Department of Justice, and we have just received in very recent days a final report. It makes recommendations for organisational change. I suppose it make the point that organisational change takes time and energy, and that sometimes can distract from actual provision of the services. And no matter if one thinks about this as a Venn diagram, there will always be something outside the circle. There will always be a need, therefore, for interagency working and collaboration across government departments. So we have a final report on the audit. It'll be considered, and we will see what decision government makes. But in the meantime, we have already put substantial additional funding, both in terms of the Department of Justice and our Department of Children, that has responsibility for women's refuges and other frontline services. There's already substantial additional funding in place to meet the needs, including needs that arose during COVID-19.
Okay, sir. That will be all. Thank you very much for answering my questions. Now, coming up, we will see how COVID-19 has affected tourism.